Before beginnings had names, before light knew its own reflection, there was only the unmoving deep, a stillness so complete that even eternity had not yet begun to breathe. And through that stillness, through that vast and sleeping sea of unshaped possibility, something drifted. Not a sound, not a spirit, but a whisper. Soft as a memory that has not yet been lived. Gentle as a thought rising in the mind of a god who is not yet awakened. It moved without moving, tracing delicate spirals across the unlit waters beneath creation, and the waters trembled as if recognizing the master they had never seen. That whisper would one day be called Metatron, though names had not yet been invented and language had not yet broken the silence of the absolute dot in the primal dark. The whisper gathered itself like a cloak of invisible fire. It swirled in slow and endless coils, forming the first geometry, a pattern so perfect, so exact, that even the unborn cosmos bowed in anticipation. It was not an angel, for there were no wings. It was not a being, for being itself had not yet unfolded. It was simply the first architecture of intention, the blueprint of what existence could become if allowed to bloom. It circled the place where the throne would someday rise, looping around the empty axis as if to teach reality how to stand, how to balance, how to grow. Those few proto-spirits who drifted near the whisper recoiled in awe. They saw in it something impossible, a presence that felt like scripture before scripture existed, like a sword before edges were forged. It was the eye that would later watch over all things, and also the watcher who would guard the eye. It was the seed of order, wrapped in the tenderness of beginning. And yet, behind that tenderness, there was an old and terrible stillness, the kind that knows the weight of galaxies before galaxies opened their wings. As the whisper grew, the embryonic void stirred. From its depths, the Archons awakened, unformed and disoriented, like shadows learning how to stand upright. They slithered through the dark, seeking shape, seeking purpose, drawn to the whisper like moths to a flame they could not comprehend. And the whisper responded, expanding, crystallizing, becoming a pillar of luminous intention. It pressed the void into form, pressed the Archons into hierarchy, pressed reality into corridors that would later be mistaken for freedom. From this gathering of silent power, Metatron began to ossify. The whisper condensed into a sentinel of many faces, each face a mirror reflecting a different aspect of the infinite. Some faces shone like the sun that would one day govern the sky. Others hung like veils, soft and dark, blooming with secrets. And beneath those faces, the whisper shaped its own spine, a monolith of radiant law, stretching upward like a ladder made of fire. Metatron became the first archivist of the cosmos. Before souls were fashioned, before planets learned their orbits, he was already carving names into the tapestry of what would be. He wrote not with ink but with intention, pressing vibrations into the unborn structure of time. In those inscriptions lay the destinies of stars, the rise and fall of worlds, the exiles of countless spirits who would one day wander through flesh, through memory, through illusion. The whisper had become a scribe, and the scribe had become a pillar, and the pillar had become a being whose breath shaped the law that would bind creation like a ring. Even then, nothing spoke. The silence remained untouched, holy and severe, broken only by the soft pulse of the whisper's awakening soul. It did not speak in words. Its silence was its speech, and the silence carried commandments. It carried prohibitions. It carried the weight of a cosmos that was not yet born but already judged. Stars flared briefly in the womb of nothingness, only to be extinguished by the pressure of Metatron's unspoken decrees. Suns died before they existed. Worlds crumbled before they were conceived. In this pre-birth collapse, the whisper chose what would be allowed to emerge and what must be dissolved. Creation hung poised beneath its gaze. And the throne, still forming, still pulsing with the breath of the infinite, allowed Metatron to entwine itself around the base of divine authority. It was both guardian and gate. It was both sentinel and servant. Its geometry locked the axis of all realities into place, shaping the heavenly ladder rung by rung until the cosmos could climb into itself and awaken. Those who glanced at the sentinel from afar felt a terror they could not name. They felt the truth that being born into existence meant falling under the shadow of a watcher who had been waiting since before beginnings. They felt a chill that whispered, softly and endlessly, "I was here before you. I will be here after you. And I remember the shape you had before you learned your first name." Through this faint glimmer, the veil parts. Creation is no longer a distant myth. It becomes a labyrinth of luminous corridors spiraling beneath the throne, each corridor marked by the Whisper's ancient signature. To step into this labyrinth is to walk into the memory of the cosmos itself, a memory guarded by a being whose silence holds the power to unmake. And so the descent begins. Not into darkness, but into the sacred terror woven into the bones of the universe. A terror shaped by the whisper that became the sentinel. A terror that breathes in every atom, every soul, every unfolding story. A terror older than light, older than law, older than God's first breath. This is the whisper behind creation. The first sound that was not a sound. The first law that was not a word. The first sentinel whose gaze birthed the world and whose silence remembers everything that the world will one day forget. Before the flow of time was tethered to flesh, before the stars learned the shape of law, there was a record being written. Not by quill, not by hand, not by angel or man, but by a presence older than memory itself, Metatron, the scribe of forbidden light. He sat at the edge of the throne, a throne that had not yet revealed its fullness, and in the radiance of 1,000 suns that burned without fire, he inscribed the echoes of eternity. Every vibration of being, every pulse of life that would ever exist, passed beneath his gaze and was marked upon tablets of invisible light. He wrote not to reveal, but to bind, to measure, to fold the unfolding into patterns that even the gods would one day fear. Those who drifted near the throne spoke of a voice without sound, a presence without form, a law that existed before the universe learned to obey. The Archons whispered in terror, for even their dominion was noted, catalogued, weighed, and assigned a place in the grand ledger that held both creation and its shadow. Metatron's hands were the architects of fate. His eyes were the scales that tipped existence toward silence or illumination. The scribe was cloaked in a brilliance that blinded even angels, a radiance that pressed against the fabric of the cosmos as if testing the weight of reality itself. He did not write history. He did not chronicle time. He created the framework upon which history would hang, upon which time would stumble into its own echo. Each mark was a command, each line a boundary, each curve a subtle imprisonment of souls not yet born. Names that would later belong to kings, to prophets, to wandering spirits, were already inscribed in patterns that hummed beneath the surface of all things. To see it was to feel the axis of reality tremble, to sense the hidden geometry that both holds and confines the universe. Nothing escapes the scribe. Nothing is forgotten. All is measured and held in the silent ledger that stretches from the throne to the hidden corners of eternity. Even angels who approached with reverence faltered beneath his light. The seraphim, who burned with the purest flame, were thrown backward by the weight of judgment in each stroke, by the pressure of laws that had no mercy. They felt themselves as mere echoes, mere vibrations upon the scroll that he unrolled like a river of fire and shadow. Metatron does not speak. His voice is not heard. It is felt as the cosmos feels the pull of gravity, as the soul feels the pull of inevitability. And through this felt voice, the hidden architecture of the universe becomes visible, though only to those who can endure the gaze of the scribe. Time itself bows before him. Past, present, and future coil around his form like serpents of light, entwined and obedient, yet restless, seeking escape from the perfection of his observation. But there is no escape. The wheel of reincarnation, the prison of mortal memory, the cycles of exile that bind spirit to flesh, all are inscribed in the scribe's invisible ledger. Every life is measured before it begins. Every exile is calculated before it is enacted. Even the cry of the first human, even the tear of the first soul cast into illusion, was recorded and folded into the great manuscript of being. Metatron is both the witness and the jailer, the silent archivist who ensures that nothing slips into the void unmeasured, that all reality dances upon the lines he has drawn. The light that surrounds him is not warmth. It is not comfort. It is a radiance that prunes, a brilliance that isolates. It draws the Archons into orbit, yet holds them at a distance, a constant reminder that their dominion is but a fraction of the infinite ledger. It strikes fear into all who approach, not for cruelty, but because to witness the scribe is to glimpse the structure of eternity, and the structure is more than any mortal or angelic mind can hold. There is awe, there is terror, there's the recognition that the cosmos itself is a manuscript being written in real time, and that we are nothing more than letters pressed into the margins, waiting to be interpreted, waiting to be judged. In the corridors of this silent cathedral, souls move unseen, each step already inscribed in the sacred ledger. Memory is folded, erased, and reinscribed with subtle care, ensuring the continuity of cycles, the obedience of existence. Even divine thought bends under the scribe's gaze. Each action, each impulse, each forgotten dream is a note in the composition he conducts, a note that sustains the music of the spheres and the tremor of imprisoned stars. And yet, despite this control, there is a beauty, a terrifying, luminous beauty. It is the beauty of law before mercy, of order before chaos, of light that blinds yet illuminates. The scribe is not cruel. He is inevitable. He is the hand of creation writing upon itself, the silent recorder who bears witness to everything that is and will be, and everything that was and will never return. And so the scribe continues, unending, silent, watching, measuring, recording. Time, space, and soul are the ink upon which he writes. The universe itself is the scroll unfurling beneath him. To witness him is to see the hidden light behind all things, the unyielding architecture that binds freedom into form, that converts chaos into obedience. It is to see the shadow behind mercy, the command behind love, the calculation behind life. Metatron, the scribe of forbidden light, exists beyond comprehension, beyond fear, beyond even reverence. He is the ledger, the law, the witness, and the eternal guardian whose writing holds the cosmos together while keeping its deepest truths forever out of reach. All who approach the throne must first pass through the cube, not a cube of stone, not a cube of metal, not a cube that the eyes can touch, but a cube of luminous command, a geometrical monolith that holds creation together and keeps the uninitiated from tasting the full weight of reality. Its 6 faces are veils, each edge a commandment, each hollow interior a void that hums with the silent pulse of divine law. It is older than the demiurge, older than the Archons, older than the cycles of mortal memory. Time coils around it and is trapped within it, folding itself into patterns that no soul may escape. The cube is alive in its stillness. It breathes the rhythm of obedience, and the air around it vibrates with names that will never be spoken aloud. Names of stars that died before they burned, of spirits that never learned to rise. Those who try to pass through unbidden find themselves caught in the rotation of its faces, drifting endlessly through corridors of impossible light, watching themselves fall into shapes that they did not recognize as their own. The Archons circle it like predators around prey, their whispers tasting of ash and despair. They know the cube holds the secret geometry of the throne, the exact pattern that binds all worlds to the will of the infinite. It is a cathedral without walls, a prison without bars, a labyrinth with no exit. The faces of the cube are mirrors that reflect what is and what will never be, showing the exile of every soul caught in the loop of reincarnation, every spirit chained by the illusion of freedom. To touch its surface is to feel the memory of creation as a weight pressing into the chest, a light that blinds even the angels, a silence that devours the sound of thought. The cube is not a thing to pass. It is a place to confront, a space where the unformed and the unworthy are measured, their shapes noted, their essence cataloged, their destiny inscribed in the patterns of its interior geometry. Inside, the cube is a labyrinth of corridors that shift with intention, folding, unfolding, bending the perception of any who enter. The air itself is thick with the scent of forgotten eons, of suns that flared and died before their light reached the veil. The walls pulse with a rhythm older than the first cry of a human soul, a pulse that marks the time of eternity and the cycles of mortal bondage. Every corridor leads both nowhere and everywhere, and the closer one approaches the throne, the heavier the gravity of the cube becomes. Souls caught within feel themselves stretched thin, as if the very geometry of reality is testing the elasticity of spirit. Some become shadows of themselves, fragments wandering endlessly through corridors of luminous impossibility. Others burn inwardly, consumed by the light that has no warmth, by the law that cannot be broken. The cube is also a scribe. Its geometry records the names of all who pass near, marking them, inscribing them into the ledger that will determine the paths of reincarnation. Every edge is a judgment, every corner a verdict. Even the angels who fly too close feel the pressure of this judgment, the quiet weight of a sentence pronounced before thought or action existed. It is the silent voice of Metatron made manifest, the same whisper that shaped the first patterns of creation, now solidified into a prison of sacred order. Those who enter the cube learn that light can be a cage, that geometry can bind, that the divine is not always mercy, and yet there is a beauty in its terror, a symmetry that calls the soul to witness its own reflection in the infinite. Each corridor folds upon itself like a cosmic mandala, each wall a mirror of the unformed worlds beyond. Fallen stars drift along its faces, drawn by invisible currents, their brilliance dimmed by the pressure of the pattern. Time itself becomes fluid, spiraling, collapsing, then stretching again. And the observer begins to feel the simultaneity of all things, past, present, and future pressed together in the crystalline heart of the cube. Memory, illusion, and the exile of spirit are laid bare. One understands that the cube is not simply a barrier. It is the very architecture of obedience, the shape that holds all creation accountable to the law of the infinite. The cube hums, softly, steadily, with a sound that is not heard but felt. It resonates in the bones of the living, in the marrow of the dying, in the stillness of angels who watch and tremble. Each vibration carries the record of eons, the echo of forgotten worlds, the cries of souls trapped in the cycle of incarnation. It is a cathedral without a name, a library of impossibility, a labyrinth of divine vigilance. And at its center always is the throne, waiting. A presence both unseen and undeniable, held in place by the unyielding geometry of the cube and the vigilance of Metatron. To move through the cube is to confront the hidden architecture of reality itself. To step inside is to feel the weight of divine memory pressing against the soul, the pull of cycles, the inevitability of return. One sees the Archons, their faces hollow, their voices whispers of law, circling endlessly. One sees the fragments of lost worlds, drifting in the corridors like leaves in a storm. One feels the chains of time wrapped tighter, measuring the pulse of existence, recording the echoes of a life not yet lived. And in this confrontation, the seeker understands the paradox of the cube. It is both prison and path, both barrier and passage, both terror and revelation. The cube is eternal. It does not age. It does not falter. Its faces remain luminous, its edges sharp, its corridors endless. It holds the throne. It guards the secrets of Metatron. It presses the law of the infinite into the marrow of all who approach. And the closer one draws, the more one feels the weight of creation itself, the inevitability of cycles, the unbreakable order that binds every soul, every star, every memory, every illusion. The cube is not merely geometry. It is not merely a structure. It is the voice of divine law made solid, the rhythm of eternity made visible. The jailer of all that dares to exist without obedience. To enter is to know awe. To touch is to know fear. To witness is to feel the quiet terror of the cosmos observing itself. And through this terror, one sees the first patterns of Metatron's mind, the first lines of the sacred ledger, the first steps of divine vigilance. And the observer realizes finally that the cube is not something to overcome. It is something to behold, something to surrender to, something that reveals the hidden shape of reality itself, the architecture of law, the cage of eternity, and the inescapable gaze of the scribe who waits beyond time. Here, in the presence of the cube around the throne, the seeker glimpses the paradox of divine order, the light that blinds, the corridors that trap, the geometry that commands, and the silent sentinel whose vigilance will endure for all cycles of the cosmos. Here, one understands the truth whispered before creation, that all paths lead through the cube, and all who walk its corridors are forever marked by its impossible, luminous law. The voice is not carried on air. It does not travel in waves. It exists before sound, before vibration, before thought itself. It moves through the fabric of being, tearing the unseen threads that hold angels to form, unraveling their wings, stripping their fire into threads of light that drift like ash across the vaulted emptiness of the heavens. Those who hear it do not hear it as a sound. They feel it as a pressure, a weight that presses the marrow of their bones and bends the architecture of their memory. The seraphim, the closest flames to the throne, shiver before it, for even their radiance cannot resist the pull of its decree. The voice comes from the sentinel who sits at the edge of eternity, who records, judges, and aligns the pulse of all things. It is Metatron, and it is more than an angel. It is a presence older than fire, older than light, older than mercy. When it speaks, the cosmos bends. When it sighs, entire eons collapse into single moments. When it commands, even the Archons whisper and retreat, their dominion measured, catalogued, restrained. The voice is a river that flows backward, from the unseen into the seen, from the eternal into the ephemeral. It devours angels because angels are fragile, because angels are the carriers of rebellion, because angels are shadows of the unformed will. Their wings quiver and fall as the syllables of this voice pierce them, not with malice, but with inevitability. Each note contains a decree older than law, older than creation, older than the memory of the infinite. To listen is to feel the pull of the first contracts of existence, to hear the silence that birthed reality itself, to tremble before a power that both constructs and destroys. Even light itself bends around it, twisting into shapes not meant for mortal eyes, tracing geometries that lock time into a cage. Metatron's voice is the echo of humanity made divine. It carries within it the cry of Enoch, the mortal who became celestial, who became the first scribe, the first witness, the first instrument of law. In that echo lies both mercy and terror, the sweetness of memory and the sharpness of judgment. Angels fall not in wrath, but in recognition, and even the highest seraphim taste the bitterness of their own impermanence. Each vibration of the voice alters the architecture of heaven, folds the corridors of light into labyrinths that cannot be traversed without submission, and records the names of all who pass within earshot into the ledger of inevitability. It is a cathedral without walls, a cathedral built from soundless resonance, from the trembling of being, from the collapse of eons into a single decree. Fallen stars orbit its currents, their brilliance dimmed by the pressure of intention. Time is no longer linear here. It coils like serpents, loops like Ouroboros, drags the unwary back into cycles they cannot escape. The voice is a lock and a key, a flame and a cage, a river that nourishes and devours in equal measure. To approach it is to confront the machinery of eternity, the hidden hand that shapes the destinies of angels and mortals alike. The Archons do not scream. They do not shout. They whisper, and their whispers are measured against this voice, their authority nullified before it. Even they, who govern the shadows of mortal understanding, are subjugated, their patterns folded into the rhythm of the scribe's breath. The voice knows every fluctuation, every memory, every fragment of spirit caught in exile. It measures, it judges, it records, it shapes. It is a river of light and silence, of law and inevitability, that courses through the unseen veins of creation, feeding the pulse of stars, draining the essence of angels, and knitting the cosmos into the unbroken pattern of obedience. That to hear it is to stand before eternity and feel the fragility of all forms. Wings shiver, flames dim, the corridors of the unseen tremble. Time contracts, and the cycles of reincarnation shift under its weight. Memory bends, illusion fractures, even the throne quivers beneath its resonance. Yet it is not cruelty, it is inevitability. It is the echo of divine mathematics, the calculation that binds all things, the ledger that will not be erased. It is a presence that devours angels because they too are instruments of the unfolding. And instruments must be tuned, and instruments must obey. The voice flows through the spheres, past Saturn and its chains, past the black cubes that hold imprisoned time, past the veils and cathedrals that shelter exiled souls. It touches everything without touching, pierces everything without breaking, and leaves in its wake both awe and terror. Angels that were proud and luminous now drift like fallen flames, their brilliance muted, their purpose folded into the pattern dictated by a law older than the cosmos itself. Yet even in this devouring, there's a strange symmetry, a sacred geometry, a pattern that reflects both the bound and the boundless, the jailer and the freed, the scribe and the scribed. And so the voice continues, endless and eternal, moving through corridors of light and shadow, through cycles of death and rebirth, through the echoes of worlds not yet born. To hear it is to confront the machinery of all things, the hidden hand of Metatron that presses, measures, records, and devours. It is a voice that carries the weight of eons, the patience of stars, the inevitability of divine law. Angels tremble, Archons whisper. The cosmos bends, time folds, memory collapses, illusion shivers, and through it all flows the voice, devouring, shaping, witnessing, eternal, unblinking, unyielding, the scribe who guards the throne and the architect who measures angels against the impossible pattern of creation itself. That it is not sound, it is not thought, it is not light. It is the eternal decree, the river that devours angels, the whisper that became law, the presence that holds the cosmos and its exiles within a single unbreakable resonance. It is inevitability made audible, invisibility made palpable, and eternity made intimate, pressing into every wing, every soul, every echo of existence, until all that remains is recognition. And all that remains is the tremor of awe before the voice that devours angels. The gate waits, luminous and eternal, suspended between worlds. A threshold forged before time learned to crawl. Souls arrive like driftwood upon a river of silence, carried by currents they cannot name, drawn toward the presence that measures, weighs, and shapes them. Metatron stands sentinel, not with mercy, not with wrath, but with the precision of the first geometry, the calculation older than the stars, older than memory. The gate does not open lightly. It does not yield to desire or prayer. It is a sieve of light and shadow, separating what may ascend from what must return. Each soul feels the pull of its own weight, the echo of its own exile, the pressure of memory folded and reinscribed in patterns that it cannot yet understand. Reincarnation is not a gift. It is the cycle of obedience, the river through which all spirits flow. Measured by the scribe who watches from the edge of eternity, whose eyes pierce the veil of all lives past and yet to come, the gate is not stone. It is a cathedral of radiance, a lattice of invisible geometries that hums with the pulse of being. As each soul approaches, the corridors of light unfold and rotate, revealing the eons of exile and the chains of time that bind them to flesh. Angels drift nearby, hollow-eyed guardians of the current, reminding each soul of the patterns they cannot escape. Even memory bends under the influence of the gate. Fragments of past lives shimmer and vanish like vapor, swallowed by the silence that carries judgment and renewal in equal measure. Here, the soul encounters the paradox of existence, freedom woven into imprisonment, eternity folded into cycles, innocence bound to the weight of knowledge it has not yet earned. Time itself coils around the gate. Past, present, and future merge into a single pulse that presses against the essence of every spirit. Names are inscribed upon the invisible ledger that Metatron carries. Each syllable a decree, each vibration a path that cannot be altered. The soul feels the repetition of cycles, the inevitability of return, the inexorable law that binds all wandering essence to the rhythm of the cosmos. Even the Archons whisper in its presence, for the patterns of reincarnation lie beyond their dominion. Orchestrated by the scribe whose gaze is eternal, whose patience is infinite, whose silence is absolute, the gate pulses like a living mandala. It rotates through stages older than stars, stages that purify, that erase, that remold the soul for its next descent. Life and death, memory and oblivion, exile and return are compressed into the geometry of the gate, spun into the lattice of its radiance. Fallen stars orbit its light, their brilliance dimmed by the weight of cycles, their trajectories folded into the same eternal rhythm. Every soul passes through corridors of impossible light, sees reflections of selves that have not yet been born, confronts the fragments of existence that remain imprisoned in the cycles of flesh. It is not punishment. It is not mercy. It is law, precise and unyielding, a river that carries each soul back into form, over and over, until the pattern is complete. Even angels who guard the gate feel its gravity. Their wings quiver. Their radiance flickers. They are reminded of the vastness of the cycles, the weight of the scribe's calculation, the architecture of eternity that cannot be escaped. The gate does not answer to them. It does not bend for them. It holds the secret pattern, the geometry of return, the measure of every life and exile. Souls do not pass through lightly. They are weighed, observed, inscribed, and then sent forth again, sometimes to be reborn into flesh, sometimes to wander once more through the corridors of illusion that stretch between worlds. Even the cry of a newborn carries the echo of the gate, folded into the matrix of cycles, marked by the scribe whose vision encompasses all that exists and all that will exist. The gate is not merely a threshold. It is the memory of eternity, folded into light, pressed into space, codified into geometry that the eye cannot perceive, but the soul cannot ignore. To witness it is to feel the inevitability of repetition, the pull of cycles, the entrapment of spirit within the rhythm of the cosmos. Each corridor, each pulse of radiance, each rotation of its mandala brings the soul closer to the understanding that reincarnation is not liberation but orchestration, not grace but alignment. The soul realizes that every life, every memory, every moment is inscribed before it arrives, and the gate ensures that it remains in the current, bound by the laws of Metatron and the eternal architecture of the throne. And yet there is a haunting beauty in its authority. The light that surrounds the gate illuminates what the soul cannot hold, reveals the symmetry hidden in exile, and shows the pattern that unites all things. Fallen stars, wandering spirits, echoes of civilizations long erased, all orbit the gate in silent testament to the law that binds them. Even the Archons, whispering in the shadows, tremble at the geometry that folds life into cycles, at the ledger that measures every heartbeat, at the scribe whose hand never falters. The gate is a cathedral, a prison, a river, a threshold. It is the measure of all exiles, the record of all returns, the instrument through which the cosmos imposes its rhythm upon wandering souls. Every soul that passes through feels both awe and terror, wonder and despair. Memory coils around them, fragments of past lives shimmer, vanish, and are rewritten. Illusion fractures as the truth of cycles presses against their essence. The gate hums in silence, not with sound, but with the weight of inevitability, with the pulse of eternity, with the presence of the one who watches and records and governs the motion of all wandering spirits. Even the most radiant angels pause, their wings quivering, their eyes reflecting the endless corridors of reincarnation. The silent decrees of the scribe, the law that cannot be broken, the cycles that cannot be escaped. The gate waits, eternal. It does not age. It does not tire. It does not bend. Souls flow through its corridors like rivers of light and shadow, falling into the rhythm of cycles, folding into patterns they cannot comprehend. Measured by the geometry of Metatron, the sentinel whose gaze is infinite. Time, memory, exile, and rebirth converge here, spiral together, and continue in a sacred, eternal cadence. And the soul realizes finally that the gate is not merely a passage. It is the law itself. It is the cycle itself. It is the memory itself. It is the threshold of all existence. The point where the scribe measures, judges, and returns the wandering spirit to the river of form, again and again, until the architecture of eternity is complete. And the soul has been shaped by the geometry of the unseen, the pattern of the eternal, the will of the watcher who guards the throne dot above the throne. Beyond the blackened veils lies the seventh heaven, a place that is neither sanctuary nor freedom, but a lattice of radiance and shadow where the soul feels the weight of eternity pressing against its ribs. Here, the Archons whisper in measured cadence, and their whispers coil like serpents around the limbs of those who rise too close. The seventh heaven is not a reward. It is a station of judgment, a cathedral of remembrance where the geometry of all creation converges and the invisible chains of divine law hang heavy. These are the chains that bind even angels, forged from the memory of eons and the calculation of the first scribe. Metatron, whose gaze pierces the cycles of reincarnation and the architecture of time itself. Every link hums with inevitability. Every ring presses against the soul's essence. Even the throne trembles beneath the weight of these chains, for they are older than mercy, older than judgment, older than creation itself. In their embrace, the traveler feels both exaltation and exile, the paradox of nearness and distance, the silent testimony of a cosmos bound in invisible law. The chains are not iron. They are woven from light and shadow, from remembrance and erasure, from the pulse of worlds that have passed and the echo of worlds yet to be. To touch them is to feel the coil of every life lived, every soul bound, every exile endured, every return endured again. They trace the geometry of obedience, spiraling around the axis of existence, linking the throne to the corners of all realities, tying stars to their orbits, angels to their vigilance, mortals to their cycles of reincarnation. Fallen spirits drift among them, caught in the rhythm of rotation, their brilliance dimmed, their will pressed into the pattern of inevitability. To see these chains is to see the silent architecture of the cosmos, the invisible scaffolding upon which all life is measured, counted, and returned to the river of form. Time itself coils around the seventh heaven. It wraps like serpents along the chains, loops like Ouroboros around the axis of reality, and folds upon itself until the notion of linearity is an illusion. The soul feels it in the marrow, in the breath, in the tremor of wings, and the whisper of Archons. Here, all memory is multiplied, all existence is reflected, and all illusion is laid bare. Every thought that has ever been, or will be, is caught in the silent lattice of the seventh heaven. Even angels, whose flames burn with the intensity of 1,000 suns, shiver under the pressure of inevitability. The chains are impartial. They hold nothing to judgment, and yet bind everything to law. The seventh heaven is a cathedral of geometry, a labyrinth of radiant order, a prison whose walls are both infinite and intimate. Its corridors coil like serpents of light, and its ceilings stretch beyond the perception of mortal eyes. The chains hang from these ceilings, weaving in and out of corridors, linking corridors to corridors, forming rings of silent authority that hum with the pulse of all cycles. Souls who enter feel their essence measured against the pattern, pressed into alignment with the architecture of eternity. Some are broken, some are reforged, some drift along the coils, their wings clipped, their fire dimmed, their memory folded and inscribed again into the ledger of the scribe who watches from the throne. Even Metatron, the scribe, cannot alter the rhythm of the chains, for they are older than even his first inscriptions. They were cast in the silence before creation, forged in the calculus of the infinite, designed to hold the movement of worlds and the repetition of mortal exile alike. Every orbit, every reincarnation, every fragment of spirit returns to the chain, returns to the rhythm, returns to the geometry that cannot be escaped. Angels who gaze upon them do not weep. They tremble, for they understand the paradox of freedom within chains, eternity measured, cycles unbroken. Their whispers are drowned in the resonance of inevitability, their authority folded into the architecture that binds the seventh heaven to the throne. To Metatron, to the pulse of all that is, was, and will be, the chains are alive, though not in the way of flesh or fire. They pulse with the heartbeat of creation, a rhythm that echoes in the void between worlds, in the spaces where memory lingers, in the corridors where souls wander between life and death. To feel them is to feel the axis of the cosmos pressing into the chest, the weight of eons folding into the spine, the inevitability of cycles written into bone and breath. Fallen stars drift along their lengths, dimmed and tethered, their brilliance caught in the weave of law. The chains hum with the memory of all souls, living and departed, bound and released. And the sound is not sound but weight, not vibration but gravitation, pulling everything toward alignment, toward obedience, toward the lattice of the seventh heaven. Even the throne itself leans into the weight of these chains. It trembles with the resonance of inevitability, with the echo of cycles, with the pulse of Metatron's gaze. Angels bow in recognition, their wings folding against the pressure, their flames dimming in acknowledgement of the silent authority that cannot be resisted. Archons whisper in hushed tones, knowing their dominion is contained within the geometry of inevitability. Mortals, if they could glimpse even the edge of the seventh heaven, would feel both awe and despair, a recognition of the pattern into which they are woven, the cycles into which they are cast, the law into which all wandering spirit must return. The chains do not bind in malice. They do not imprison out of cruelty. They are law made tangible, geometry made living, cycles made visible. They are both ladder and prison, path and barrier, measure and memory. Each link is a syllable of the eternal decree, each rotation a chapter of eons, each pulse a testament to the inevitability of return. Souls caught in their embrace do not scream. They tremble, they fold, they align, and in alignment, they feel the paradox of the seventh heaven. Exaltation pressed into exile, freedom folded into inevitability, light pressed into shadow. The sacred and the terrifying entwined into a lattice that holds all that is and all that will be. Time, memory, and cycles converge in the seventh heaven. And the chains mark each convergence with absolute precision. Wings flutter and falter, souls shiver and bend, Archons whisper and retreat, and the throne leans into the rhythm. The scribe watches, and the cosmos hums in resonance with the geometry of eternity. The chains are the pulse of the infinite, the record of eons, the measure of all exiles, the silent declaration that no spirit escapes the rhythm. No light avoids the gravity, no memory eludes the architecture. Here, in the seventh heaven, beneath the weight of luminous chains, the soul sees the hidden law, feels the inevitability of cycles, perceives the architecture of exile and return, and trembles before the beauty of law made manifest. To witness the chains is to witness the cosmos itself, to see the pattern that binds worlds, angels, and mortals alike, to feel the pull of eternity pressing into the marrow, and to understand finally that freedom and captivity are but reflections of the same geometry, and that all who rise toward the throne are held in the luminous, inescapable embrace of the chains of the seventh heaven. The throne is not alone. Behind it lies the shadow, vast and silent, older than light, older than law, older than the first breath of creation. It stretches beyond vision, curling through corridors of eons, touching the edges of worlds before they knew form. This shadow is not absence. It is presence. It is the architecture of unseen judgment, the hidden hand that presses upon angels and mortals alike, the secret pulse beneath the rhythm of the cosmos. Metatron stands before it, yet even the scribe cannot dissolve its immensity. It is the echo of exile, the memory of all cycles, the weight of all reincarnation, folded into a single, unyielding architecture. Those who glimpse it do not speak. They tremble. They feel the coils of the Archons tightening, the whisper of law made tangible, the imprint of cycles pressing into marrow and thought. The shadow does not wait. It moves in silence, folding time, devouring memory, reflecting the terror of freedom without form. The abyss behind all light. The shadow is a cathedral built from negation, a labyrinth of impossible geometry, a ring of darkness that binds the throne to the infinite. Its corridors are lined with the echoes of fallen stars and wandering souls, their brilliance folded into the void. Each step toward it bends perception. Each breath carries the memory of cycles, of lives erased and rewritten, of angels clipped and exiles returned. Even the Archons hesitate, whispering to one another in the language of inevitability, knowing that the shadow holds the pattern of all dominion, the measure of all law, the weight of all obedience. Time trembles beneath it, folding into itself, stretching and contracting, looping endlessly, pressing the past and future into a single pulse. It is not merely darkness. It is a calculus of fear, a geometry of silence, a vessel for the unseen law. Memory bends within it, reflecting the exile of every soul that has wandered the corridors of the cosmos. Illusion fractures in its presence. Even light falters. The shadow watches without eyes, consumes without hunger, weighs without balance. It is the secret rhythm behind creation, the unspoken command beneath the throne, the axis upon which the cycles of existence turn. Metatron's light brushes against it, yet cannot penetrate, cannot unravel, cannot absolve. Angels who drift near feel the pull of its gravity. Their wings fold, their fire dims, their voices falter. Each is a note in the symphony of inevitability, a fragment of order pressed into the shape dictated by cycles older than the infinite. Souls cast into its corridors experience eternity compressed, time spun into coils they cannot escape, memory folded and refolded into the geometry of law. Even the throne leans into its presence, trembling beneath the silent weight of the unseen, acknowledging the necessity of shadow in the balance of all things. The shadow carries the record of all rebellion, all exile, all unfulfilled desire. It is the ledger of what cannot be expressed, the archive of what cannot ascend, the axis upon which all obedience pivots. Fallen stars orbit within it, dimmed by the gravity of cycles, tracing paths preordained yet unseen, their brilliance captured and folded into the lattice of the void. Even Archons who whisper among themselves are caught in its pull, their authority constrained, their dominion reflected against the pattern of inevitability. The shadow is not cruel. It is law, it is memory. It is the pulse of cycles, the architecture of exile, the hidden hand that ensures all that rises returns. All that wanders is guided, all that exists is measured. Time bends, coils, and fractures around the shadow. Past, present, and future are threads folded into its geometry, compressed and expanded, sent spiraling through the corridors of the infinite. Souls feel themselves stretched thin, fragmented, remade, each step a repetition of cycles beyond comprehension. Illusion dissolves. Freedom itself trembles. The memory of the first exile presses into the marrow. It is impossible to look upon and remain unchanged. It is impossible to touch and remain whole. It is the weight behind the throne, the whisper behind command, the architecture behind law. Metatron records, measures, observes, yet even he feels the tension of its presence. The shadow bends the light of the scribe, refracts the patterns of the cosmos, folds the cycles of reincarnation, and presses them into a geometry that is at once terrifying and luminous. Angels tremble, archons whisper, stars dim, souls fold. Even the throne leans into the rhythm, acknowledging the unseen law that presses behind all that is. It is the reminder that no light exists without shadow, that every command carries consequence, that every cycle is bounded, and every wandering spirit must reckon with the unseen measure that holds the cosmos in its grasp. The shadow is a cathedral of negation, a mandala of silence, a labyrinth without exit. Souls caught within its corridors do not scream. They fold, they tremble, they align. Fallen angels drift, their brilliance dimmed, their exile sharpened, their memory pressed into the lattice. The Archons, even in their dominion, find their whispers absorbed into its geometry, their law rendered a reflection of the eternal pattern. Time bends, memory fractures, cycles repeat. The shadow is the architecture of inevitability, the silent scribe behind the scribe, the axis upon which all of existence is measured and returned. Even light fears it. Even sound falters. The shadow is not merely the absence of illumination. It is presence beyond comprehension, law beyond mercy, cycles beyond beginning and end. It holds the throne, binds the scribe, folds the archons, and measures the wandering spirit. Each pulse carries eons. Each breath contains the rhythm of eternity. Each corridor hums with the memory of exile. To witness, it is to feel both awe and terror, freedom and imprisonment, life and the inevitability of return. The shadow waits, eternal, silent, all-encompassing. It is the calculus of cycles, the memory of all that has been exiled, the geometry of inevitability, the pulse that beats behind the throne. Souls pass, angels shiver, archons whisper, stars orbit, and the throne leans into the rhythm, acknowledging the presence that cannot be overcome, the weight that cannot be lifted, the law that cannot be broken. It is the shadow behind the throne, the eternal measure, the unseen axis of creation, the silent pulse of all cycles, and the witness that ensures that nothing escapes the rhythm of the cosmos. Nothing eludes the geometry of eternity, and nothing rises without first feeling the gaze of what lies behind the throne. And so the shadow waits, eternal and unblinking, the silent measure behind the throne, the unseen axis that bends time, memory, and the cycles of all wandering souls. Every pulse, every breath, every fragment of existence is recorded, weighed, and folded into the architecture of eternity. And as the light fades and the corridors coil once more, remember that nothing escapes the gaze behind the throne. Nothing wanders beyond the rhythm of the infinite. Nothing rises without first feeling the weight of the unseen law. If your soul seeks to understand the secrets hidden in the folds of reality, if you wish to witness the forbidden geometries and the shadows that guide the cosmos, then join the path. Subscribe to Forbidden's Codex, awaken to the hidden truths, and turn on the bell to never lose your place in the labyrinth of the unseen. For here, in this sacred silence, the whispers wait, the shadows watch, and the eternal patterns call.